I've had those conversations, quite frankly, with people that are in that boat, and they say,
Mm,
what you're talking about sounds great. I know I need it. I don't have that money. What do you think I should do? And I say, you know what? Keep doing what you're doing. Working your job or whatever it is, and keep trying to set aside a little bit of cash. Keep working on your plan, and get
mm,
yourself in a little bit better financial position to actually launch this business the right way. That's actually my best advice. And I don't want to discourage anybody from
mm.
starting a business. Don't take me wrong there. Um, I just want people to put themselves in the best position to be successful as they possibly can. And that requires a little bit of capital.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that has built several businesses into 7- and 8-figure companies, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on our expert episode, which is Kent, and I'm going to call him Kent G because I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill his last name if I even try and pronounce it. But Kent, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe it'll be very exciting. Maybe people find it boring, but business formations, kind of how you strategize with your business, and maybe a little bit about finance and marketing as well. But my interest in bringing Kent on is there are a lot of businesses out there that you jump to an LLC because that's the first thing, or you don't even set up a business because we're just doing it out of our garage or on eBay or on Amazon. And there's some drawbacks and things to consider and how you might juggle those, or how you might want to set them up. So figured Kent would come on and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. So with that, welcome to the podcast, Kent.
Hey, thanks, Devin. I appreciate that. Appreciate you having me on. My name is Kent Gustafson, and I am the founder of multiple businesses like Devin, founder of Safe Shield Consulting, also founder of Kent Gustafson Consulting. And I've been an entrepreneur now for just about 14 years. I spent nearly 13 years in corporate America in a variety of capacities, but primarily in operations management, and started my own business almost 14 years ago. And my focus was really on helping people start, grow, and sustain successful businesses. And what I have learned and what I have tried to teach others over the course of my 14 years is really just how critical it is to get your business set up and structured properly, and really started on the right foot. And over the course of time, I've worked with nearly 2,000 businesses in the last 14 years, and have played what I like to always consider a small but important role in seeing many of those businesses go on to be highly successful, which is really, for me, what I measure myself on is can I help other people be successful? And that's something that I've been able to do.
So now, and I think that's a great introduction. I agree. I think there's a lot of facets that make a business successful, and hopefully we can hit on a few of those today. So maybe with that, let's just dive into it. The first one that always comes to mind, and I'm sure there are plenty, and we'll probably run out of time before we ever get through them all, is business formations. And that's oftentimes I always look at, there are usually one of two things when people get excited about a business or an idea. Beyond just the idea stage, and they start to get serious, they'll either do. One is they're either going to go out and make sure they create a logo, because that's always fun to see it take to life. And then the other thing they made me look at is kind of, okay, now I don't know exactly why or how, but I need to form a business. And that could be, I don't know, am I a partnership? Am I a sole proprietor? Am I an LLC? Am I an S Corp? Am I a C Corp? And kind of those things. And oftentimes people kind of don't know what they do. So they go on, Google it, get some general ideas. Sometimes Google gives you good answers. Sometimes it's horrible answers. But how do they, as they're starting to take that first step, let's say they got their logo, so we got that out of the way. How do they take that first step in doing a business formation, or figuring out, should they be a nonprofit, an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, a sole proprietor, a partnership, all or none of the above? And how do you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, fair question there, Devin. I think, for most people, the nonprofit path typically isn't the first venture. That's typically something that comes about after they've been involved in starting and operating a small business. Not always, but typically those nonprofits come up kind of after they've been down this path a time or two. A lot of people that I work with come to me because they have an idea
Mm,
and they're passionate about that idea. They want to turn it into a business, but they really aren't sure where to start. I would say probably 50% of the people that I deal with fall into that category, maybe even a little bit higher.
mm.
Another large portion of the people I deal with come to me saying, I need an LLC, and I hear you're the guy that can help me do that. And I would
Mm.
say that of those people, probably 98% of them don't even know what an LLC is or why they need it. But perhaps, a friend or family member suggested it. Maybe their accountant or their attorney or their banker. And so for me, helping people first understand what an LLC is, which it stands for Limited Liability Company,
Mm.
and it is intended to be a formal legal structure that creates separation between your business and the activities of the business and you as an individual. And I always tell people on the front end, if it's formed properly and if it's maintained properly,
Mm.
it creates a layer of separation between you and the business. And so if something goes wrong within your business, if somebody pursues legal action against you, or you find yourself in some type of litigious situation, the LLC provides liability protection so that you're not going to lose your house, your boat, your cars, and other assets like that.
Mm.
And usually when people understand that, it's easy for them to get excited about getting that first step taken care of, getting that business set up. Now, in some cases,
So
people,
before we leave off of that note, because if I and I think that well under reflects my understanding and how I often explain it, but let me break it down and maybe see if it makes sense this way as well. Is basically if you were to just start, let's say, a sole proprietorship, or you just started a business, you never did any formation, you just say, hey, I'm going to start selling a product out of my garage. It's going to be Devin Miller, the individual that sells it. Then let's say that there was anything from trademark infringement, patent infringement, product safety liability. If it was an expensive product and you got lost in the mail and somebody sued it, or somebody got mad at you for whatever reason, they filed a lawsuit and you never formed it. You just simply did it out of your garage. You did it as an individual. You just started your own business. You may have seen it on YouTube or one of those videos where, hey, you can drop ship things and it will be awesome. And and then people, whatever the reason is, somebody comes and sues you. If you have zero barrier in, they can come after your personal assets, which would include your house, your boat, your car, your property, your savings, anything else, because you don't create any of that barrier. Now, maybe they'll lose because they don't have a good lawsuit, but they'll still come after those assets if you put that at least at LLC or some sort of a corporation in the in the middle of you. Then it allows you to at least have that one additional layer that they have to go through, or they have to before they can ever go after you personally. Is that a fair way to describe it?
absolutely. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people, Devin, that start out their business as a sole proprietor.
Mm,
Perhaps they register an assumed name with the state. um, they have no idea that they're opening themselves up. As soon as you open a business, you take on a certain degree of risk. And
mm,
some businesses carry more risk than others, but the
sure.
reality of it is when you are a business owner, large or small, you have a target on your back. And
Mm,
so part of, for me, I really am focused on making sure that the people that I work with, and even people that I might not work with but have a chance to talk to, I want them to be educated first and foremost. I never want to see somebody get in trouble because they had no idea the risks that they were facing. Now, sometimes people are educated and they just don't care, right? They move on and take the risk, and that's their business. But most people want to do things the right way. Most people want to be protected. And so for that sole proprietor that you talked about that started their business out of their garage, and all of a sudden maybe they're making, $1 million or $1.5 million a year, they've got something right now that needs to be protected. And so creating that LLC or that corporation, it really creates that layer of separation, or that barrier. The legal metaphor is corporate veil. It keeps that corporate
mm,
veil in place that protects their personal property. Uh, a lot of people come to me in that situation, right? They've been at it for a while. They're making money, and perhaps they want to take advantage of some tax benefits that are available to them, or they want the liability protection, or both. And so that conversation then expands to, okay, there's the structural foundation of the business, there's the asset protection aspect of the LLC or the corporation. Then there's also, what are some tax advantages that you might be able to leverage to save yourself some money on taxes. And that's typically when I get into the conversation with people about potentially becoming an S corporation.
So
And
let's dive into that just a bit deeper,
yeah,
because I think that, standard is, I think most people understand that, hey, if I'm going to do something, let's just do an LLC. It's quick, it's easy, right? So let's say, as an example, people, whether, to your point, the attorney told them, an accountant told them, the bank told them, somebody told them, hey, you should go figure out it, you should form a business around it. It will probably protect you, and it makes, having a business name, the business owns assets as opposed to the individual, and just makes things a bit easier on everything. But now, so they come to you and they say, okay, I want to start a business, and I know I think I need to have a business formed. Now, where do I go from here? What's kind of the steps that you walk through to say, should it be an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp? Kind of give us that real world example of how people might start to figure out which one they need.
yeah, I mean, that's a great question, a great point. In I'm a big proponent of Llc Structure. The reason for that is flexibility. Okay. So both an LLC and a corporation, whether that be a C Corp, S Corp, both in theory provide liability protection to the business owner. With the S Corporation, a portion of income can be protected from self-employment tax. And so people look at that and say, well, hey, if I can save money on taxes, I want to do that. What I like about the LLC structure is this: when you're first starting out and you don't have any idea if you're going to make any money or not, much less be profitable, the LLC structure, if you're a one person business, allows you to have that liability protection in place. But from a tax perspective, you can be taxed as a sole proprietorship. There's no separate tax return. It's clean, it's simple, but it also allows you the flexibility to, at some point, choose to be taxed as an S Corp. You can still maintain the LLC structure, but for tax purposes, you can file a document with the IRS where they would treat you as an S Corp. People say, well, how do I know when that is? And I say, your accountant is always going to be the best person to advise you, but I typically try to talk in round numbers and say, look, if you're at the place where you're making $100,000 a year, right? That's how much is left to pay yourself. If you are an S Corp, you can essentially break down that $100,000 and pay part of it to yourself as a salary, which you have to. You have to do that as an S Corp. You have to pay yourself a salary to run the business. But you can take the other part of that compensation as a shareholder distribution and avoid self-employment tax on that portion. And so people start to see, okay, let's say I pay myself a $50,000 salary or a $60,000 salary and take 40 or 50 in distributions. When you look at saving 15.3% tax on the portion of distributions, people see the tax savings there and they see the benefit of that. What I like about the LLC structure is that it has more flexibility in terms of its governance and management than what a corporation does. And so I kind of look at the LLC and say, well, you can ultimately have the best of both worlds, right? You can set up the LLC structure and have that freedom and flexibility, file as the S Corp, file that S election when the time comes because you're making money, and not have to necessarily take on all of the additional requirements that go along with the corporation. Now, there are some times when the corporation does make sense in terms of strategic growth, how you want to transition the business, whether or not you want to bring in partners that would invest and have a shareholder interest. Those are things that I try to flesh out as much as possible with people on the front end,
Mm.
just so that we can plan accordingly going forward. Um, but some of
So
those things
if I,
are
yeah, so almost to jump in, because I think listing out a couple, it sounds like one is a tax purpose, right? In the sense
yeah.
that an LLC gives you the flexibility of, is depending on how you want to do your taxes, whether you're an individual just running it by yourself, or if you're doing it with multiple partners, then it gives you that flexibility. So, maybe walking through for people that are listening, one reason is to protect your personal assets. So that way, somebody doesn't come and take your house, your car, your boat, your whatever, your life savings because you put out a product that they decided they wanted to sue you about, or a service. The second one is taxes, in the sense that it can, it give you the flexibility to, depending on what your business is and how you're doing it, tax considerations always play into that. Now, if you were to go now, because I think you were starting to hit on one thing I'm aware of, or at least could be coming across of, is, S corp and C corp. If you're going to an investor, you're going to someone that's going to want shares as opposed to equity, or if you're going to be continually going out doing multiple rounds of fundraising of investors, of angel investors, that's the time where you may want to consider an S corp or a C corp. Is that right, or am I wrong?
No, that's true. I do see people pursue investment through the LLC structure, and there's ways to do that, but there are limitations. There are limitations on what you can do with an S corp. For example, with an S corporation, you cannot have more than 100 shareholders.
Hmm.
So if you're looking to go really, really big, you're probably looking at a C corp. The other thing is, with an S corporation, every single shareholder
Hmm.
has to be an individual. So I deal with a lot of complex business structures. People, let's say real estate, for example,
Hmm.
they might have several different LLCs that own different real estate properties. And then they might have an overarching LLC that owns their interest in each of those LLCs. You cannot do that with an S corporation, because each owner of the S corp has to be an individual. So those are some things that you kind of have to work through with people on the front end, if possible, as well. What are your big picture plans? Do you see yourself going out and getting investment? How do you want to do that? Do you want to have multiple classifications of stock? Voting and non-voting. Those are things that you don't typically talk through with somebody that's never started a business before, because it's going
Hmm.
to be way over their head. And I try to keep it as simple as possible for people on the front end. Like you said, first, let's protect the assets. Second, let's talk about the different tax benefits that might be available, and then what you might be looking to do with that company going forward.
So now let me ask one question, kind of almost a follow up. So let's say I start out and my dream is I'm going to own it 100%, right? And then, I'm going to take off and I'm going to have it all to myself and I'm going to make a lot of money. And then a year down the road, I said, okay, I'm going to need a lot more money than anticipated. This isn't going to work. I need to bring on investors, and investors are telling me, because whether they're angel or venture capital, or it's an entity as opposed to an individual or anything of that nature, that I should do an S corp or a C corp. How hard is it to switch between an LLC and an S corp and a C corp? Is it, hey, is it monumentous? Can be a lot of time, money, and effort? Is it as simple as, hey, I just fill out a simple form and send it in? Or how do you kind of, if you're worried about making the wrong decision because you're going to be having to maybe switch it down the road, lay out, is it one that should be a major concern or just a minor concern?
Um, I would lean more towards minor than major.
Hmm.
Every state is different, and every state has different policies for how those things are handled. But in most states, let's say you started out as an LLC, in most states, you can file articles of conversion where you
Hmm.
convert to a different type of entity structure. Now, there's documentation that has to go along with that you have to create. Um, Sometimes getting the IRS or your state revenue department to recognize the new type of entity structure tied to your existing tax ID numbers, sometimes that's the biggest hurdle to jump through. Uh, there are occasions, though, particularly if, let's say, somebody started as an LLC, a year down the road, they realize that they really kind of need to pivot and move forward in a
Hmm.
different fashion, and bring in some angel investors or whatever. If they don't have a lot of debt on the books, it might be easier to simply close that entity and start a new one,
Mm,
or leave that entity open, operate it at, with marginal effort and marginal, income and expense, and take the new entity and pursue investment that way. So much of that is case by case specific.
mm. So if I were to now try and boil that down to my understanding level, which I got to take it down several levels, that it sounds to me like, if you need to reform it, it's not just a simple one line or one page paragraph, paper that you have to sign. They'll convert it over. It's not an arduous task that's going to be so difficult, it's not worth it. But you have options that, hey, if you wanted to start out as an LLC and things change down the road and you need to make that adjustment or that change, it's a reasonable or doable process. Is that about right?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I'm a firm believer, Devin, that there's a way to do just about anything.
Well, not because where I think that people are sometimes worried, and it's the same thing whether it's, let's say you start out as an LLC and you want to go to a non-for-profit, or you want to go to you decide, a year down the road you want to go to an S corp or a C corp. They get a bit of a, frozen a bit in the sense that, because there's so many options, they don't know how to make the decision. They just don't make any of them, and that's oftentimes the worst. The worst decision is to not form any business, to say, oh, this is all too complex, I'll worry about that down the road, and then you open yourself up to liability. So that's what I'm trying to, help people to gauge is, hey, should this be something that it should be, I should spend a lot of time and effort, or should I form an LLC, not worry about it down the road, it can be fixed, so help people maybe understand, how much time and effort they should put into worrying about this or forming it up front versus, hey, should I just throw it as an LLC, start out with that, and then I can worry about it down the road?
I'm a big believer in investing a little bit of money on the front end
Mm,
to potentially save yourself a lot of money down the road. But that's not the end all be all, right? There are limitations, I think, for most people. I'm very much about protecting people's assets and mitigating risk. And I think most people would look at that and say, well, that's a great thing. But there are limitations to how much time and how much money I can afford to devote to protecting myself in this situation, because there's countless things that could occur. My focus is on let's make the best, most cost effective, not necessarily cheap, but
mm,
cost effective. Let's try to make the best cost effective decision that we can now to put ourselves in the best position to be successful later. That doesn't mean that 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, we might have to pivot and do some things differently than how we started out.
mm.
You just don't necessarily know where your business is going to go on the front end. But I do think due diligence and investing some time and in money on the front end is a smart thing to do.
Mm.
I try to make that process as painful as possible for the people that I work with. I'm sure you do the same with the people that you work with, Devin. You're taking something that is to them complex,
Mm.
confusing, and whatever. And you're trying to take that and just take the worry out of it for them. Take away the stress, simplify it, so that they don't have to worry about it. And I think that's my focus as well.
No, and I think that I totally agree. We try and make it as painless as possible. And now you tripped into another question I was going to ask you. So let's say, okay, I've decided, listening to this podcast or doing my Google search or talking with Ken, whoever, or whoever, or however I come to the conclusion, I'm going to form an LLC. And then I have the option, do I go to an attorney to form an LLC? Do I go to Kent to form an LLC? Do I go to my CPA or my, tax accountant to form an LLC? Do I go to LegalZoom to form an LLC? Do I do it myself? And so how do you kind of weigh the pros and cons as to which avenue you should take, and it's always a budget, but let's say you have, I don't know, $700, maybe $1,000 that you're saying, I need to get this business going. And so how do you kind of weigh which avenue to take? Because all of those are cost different amounts, and, they also have different risk profiles as to whether they're not going to do it like. So thoughts on that as far as how people decide how to file?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody's got their own perspective. In my opinion, the people that go, I think you mentioned LegalZoom, and I won't pick on them, but they're one of many online, filing services. I'm not a big proponent of those people simply because they're kind of a boilerplate, one size fits all
Mm,
operation. And therefore, number one, the advertised price, it's not going to be the final price because
mm,
all of those online services, they have a la carte add-ons. It's stuff that you need, but you don't get the personal one-on-one support that so many people starting out need. So I'm not a big proponent of those. I've dealt with a lot of people that have used online filing services, and I've cleaned up the mess after the fact. It would have been way more cost effective for those people to work directly with a good attorney or to work with somebody like myself on the front end.
so
Because
maybe
this,
so what it you bring or clean up the mess. What are some of the, I don't know, horror stories or messes that you typically have to clean up so that people understand? Because I get where people are coming from saying, hey, I'm just doing a very simple, or company. Maybe I just want to do an online platform on Shopify, and I create drop shipping type of a business. It's really simple. It's not complex. What are, so they said, well, template's probably fine for me. I'll just go to LegalZoom. And I think to your point, LegalZoom, you always have about, it seems like 5 or 10 add-ons that, you never know if you need them or not. So you end up adding them all to the cart, and as expensive as if you'd done or had an attorney do it in the first place. But putting that aside, what are some of kind of those horror stories or things that people get wrong or don't get right when they try and use, whether it's the self-service, do it themselves, or some of the online kind of DIY projects?
yeah, one of the things that I look at, Devin, is the differences in statutes from state to state.
Mm,
I am based in Minnesota, and up until 2016, the Minnesota LLC statutes were quite a bit different than a lot of other states in that they required a board of governors to manage the LLC. There was no such thing in Minnesota as a member managed LLC or a manager managed LLC. You had to
mm,
name a board of governors, even if it was just you, right? Even if you were the sole member, the sole officer, the sole governor, you still had to have that terminology in place, and that had to exist in your operating agreement and in your other formation documents. Uh, the online filing services had no idea that Minnesota's LLC statutes said what they said, and
mm,
so they would name uh, LLCs as manager managed or member managed LLCs. They would create documents that had direct statutory conflicts with the laws of the state. And over the years, I found those things to pop up in other states as well, where there's something a little bit unique about, the state of Washington, for example, or the state of Maryland, and those one size fits all templates don't catch those differences, and
mm,
therefore they create documentation that is in conflict with the statutes in that particular state. So those are some of the things that I've seen pop
mm.
up. I always tell people you get what you pay for. If you're going for something cheap or inexpensive, well, then that's the outcome you're going to get. Most of the people that I deal with, if
Mm.
not all, are surprised at what they actually get, and the cost is not anywhere close to what they would have envisioned that it would be, based on what they get. And so I always tell people, look, you got to make the decision that's right for you. But if you want somebody that truly understands this process and can really walk you through it hand in hand, step by step, you're not going to go to an online filing service. You're going to choose someone like me, or you're going to choose a business attorney that focuses primarily on corporate law and setting up small businesses.
So now let me ask the hard question. So let's say they don't have the money to go to an attorney, and I don't have the money to, I'm doing this as a complete bootstrapped. Don't have any money aside. I'm trying to do this on a $5 budget type of a thing or a side hustle. And so I just simply don't have the money to go to somebody that's an attorney or otherwise specializes in it or can provide that service. Am I better to simply not do anything, or should I do a LegalZoom or a Rocket Lawyer or whichever one you do? Is it better to have something than nothing, or should you wait or just hold off and do nothing until you save up and have the money?
You know, that's a hard question to answer. I sometimes I think doing nothing and then pleading ignorance is maybe you're maybe better served than to do something that's incredibly wrong and then hope that that, protects you. I'll actually go back to what I think is the root of your question,
Sure.
and it's the budget, right? I don't have any
Mhm.
money.
Yeah.
And, I do a lot of work with startups, and I focus on 5 core pillars. And one of those is the financial piece of it. And over 50% of all small businesses fail to make it 5 years. Okay.
Mm.
And of those over 50% that don't make it 5 years, the vast majority of them don't survive 2 years. And in most cases, it's because of financial reasons. And uh, there are success stories out there of people that, hey, I started my business with $1,000 or with $500, and I'm now, making, generating money hand over fist and making, millions of dollars. Those are the exception and not the rule. It takes some initial capital to get a business up and off the ground. Even if it's, $2,500 or $5,000, you need a little bit of cash to get going, and to give yourself the best chance to be successful. So I've had those conversations, quite frankly, with people that are in that boat, and they say,
Mm.
what you're talking about sounds great. I know I need it. I don't have that money. What do you think I should do? And I say, you know what? Keep doing what you're doing, working your job or whatever it is, and keep trying to set aside a little bit of cash, keep working on your plan, and get
Mm.
yourself in a little bit better financial position to actually launch this business the right way. That's actually my best advice. And I don't want to discourage anybody from
Mm.
starting a business. Don't take me wrong there. I just want people to put themselves in the best position to be successful as they possibly can. And that requires a little bit of capital.
Mm. No, and I agree. So, I think it's hard because, on the one sense, you do read a lot of stories of, hey, we didn't have anything. And, if I were to take the, at least the story you hear, whether or not it's true, I don't know, on, like a Jeff Bezos or others that, hey, I started this in my dorm room, started shipping things out, and it started to grow and it started to do. And, you're trying to say, hey, I got this opportunity. I don't love my job and I want to get something going and I at least want to try it out. Then you have the competing things of, hey, I don't have the money right now, but I want to get things going. And I think that there's, a bit of that balance in the sense that, maybe you have to prioritize. If you are going to get a business going, you have to also look at your risk profile, right? So you're saying, hey, if the risk is very low on the LLC, that I'm ever going to get sued because all I'm doing is doing a business that is out of the box, same as everybody else. I'm delivering cookies around the dorm room or taking, a new pizza delivery and something that's fairly low likelihood, maybe you can get going, try it out, see if you like entrepreneurship and then get going, and vice versa. If you're saying, hey, this is a high risk, I'm going to go and try and compete against the big boys or big players and they're going to have lots of money and I'm going to have to be able to make sure I'm squeaky clean and covered, then maybe you step back and say, hey, now it is much more important because my risk profile has gone a whole bunch up higher up, that I need to make sure to have these in place. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just thinking that, kind of seems like sometimes it's always a balance of risk versus reward and how where you fall on that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, there are some of those situations, Devin, that I've come across where at the end of the day, and I had to be careful how I said it because I don't want to bring liability on myself. Um, but where I encourage them, you know what? Why don't you see if this thing's got some legs to it? Give it a shot. I you know, I try to work with people and say, if they say, look, I don't have the budget, can you set up some kind of a payment plan or whatever?
Mm.
I'll do that in those extreme situations because I want to help people. But there have been those situations where I was maybe pessimistic about their chances of making it,
Mm.
and just kind of encourage them, look, just try and just see if you can do this on your own, and where it might take you. You can
Mm.
always come back to me when things are looking up, or you've kind of proven your concept. um, you know One question that I get asked repeatedly, which I don't ever like to answer, uh, people will come to me with a business idea and they'll say, Kent, I know you work with a lot of businesses, you've been at this a long time. What do you think of my business idea? And,
Mm.
I tell them, it's not for me to, green light their business idea or not. And the reason I say that, I've seen some of the best business ideas never go anywhere. And, for a variety of reasons, it's not the right person driving the ship. They don't have the enough capital, whatever. And conversely, I've seen some of the dumbest things you can imagine. I don't want to say that in a mean way. No, but just like, you hear it and like nobody's going to want to buy that product or whatever. And it's wildly successful. And what that tells me is there's just no predicting the market, right? You can go out and do market research and soft launch and all that. At the end of the day, you just don't know what the market might get excited about. And so I don't ever say somebody, has a great idea or has a terrible idea. If they say, well, I get it, off the record, what's your personal opinion? I'll say, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I can see a need for that. But I try not to encourage them or discourage them based on my view of their idea. At the end of the day, if they've got a dream and they're passionate about it, I want to see them pursue it, and let the chips fall where they may.
No, and I think that totally makes sense. That's kind of always, I get the same thing as an attorney is, hey, what do you think about your idea? And I says, well, it's hard to give advice. Hey, I haven't done the market research. I don't know what the demand is. I don't know what your team is, the team is like. I don't know what your funding is like. And it's really always hard. And then at the end of the day, they still want to give an idea. So usually you say, well, this, here are a few of my thoughts if I were in your shoes that I might consider. One of the things I always reflect back to is, I'm an avid watcher of Shark Tank. I think I've watched either every episode or nearly episode, starting from when the very first when they used to have little businesses that were not the big ones that make millions of dollars now and are coming on for, various reasons. But one of the things I always thought was interesting is you take one of the products that almost everybody know now, which are Ring doorbell, and that one kind of got laughed off of the stage. Why would anybody need that? We don't want to invest in that. Who needs to see their video when you're at the door, kind of thing? And that one is taken off like wildfire, and tons of people have it. And so you just never know. And so it is always that hard. And I think sometimes, to your points, it's as much as the people you have on the team, if your timing's right, if you have the right talent, the right skill sets at the right time, it can make a bigger difference in your business than just having the right idea. Well, we've gone as far, or probably over time, but it's been, I think, an insightful or hopefully helps people get an idea on LLCs and kind of what they might think about. So if people want to reach out to you, they want to ask you for your expertise, they want to use your services, they want to learn more, they want to pick your brain, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to connect up with you or reach out?
They can email me. They can email me, Kent at kentgustafson.com. They can go to either of my websites, safeshieldconsulting.com or kentgustafson.com. There's ways to contact me through the websites as well. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show, Devin. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. We appreciate you coming on, sharing all your knowledge, and wish you the best of luck on your journey.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it.